It has been a wonderful day, yes? And here we are after sitting all day. And I get this last session of meetings. And I think it's safe to say we're all kind of on overload, yes? Tired? So here's the deal I'm going to make with you. If I see your eyes closed, and if I see your head nodding, I will just assume you are praying for me. I will think the best about you. And if you see me doing that in the middle of this talk, because I've heard it before and it's not that good, you just assume the best of me. Do we have a deal? Okay, there you go. So this session, I think what we're going to do, talking about the core value of courageous integrity, just read a passage that the Apostle Paul wrote at the sunset of his life, counseling a young upstart minister by the name of Timothy in his spring season of ministry. And Paul, just at the finish line, gives him this counsel. In it, he talks about both courage and integrity. So I'm going to read the text. And then I'm just going to tell you some stories about courage and some stories about integrity. And then we will be done, and hopefully we'll all kind of finish around the same time. Sound okay? So here's the passage. 2 Timothy, if you want to turn in your Bible, beginning in chapter 1 in verse 6. This is the apostle writing to Timothy. He says, I remind you, Timothy, to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power. There he's talking about God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but rather he gave us a spirit of courage. We're going to talk a little bit about courage. And then he goes on. So, do not be ashamed to testify about our Lord or ashamed of me, his prisoner, but join with me in suffering for the gospel by the power of God, who has saved us, and notice this phrase, and called us to a holy life. God has called all of us to lead a holy life of integrity. Not because of anything we have done, but because of his own purpose and grace. Hey friends, it's only because of God's grace that we can model in the Potomac Conference courageous integrity. So a story or two about first, courage. This is not, it does not come naturally, shall we say that, to take the hard route of courage, right? Our tendency is to kind of default to the fear mode. And this goes real deep in what it means to be human. I think back to one of the earliest lessons that I learned about fear came from my 16-year-old cousin Danny. Just got his driver's license, and he invited me to go skiing with him up in Vermont at Mount Snow. Wow, I was just a little kid, so excited to go alone with Danny to go skiing. Never been skiing before. So we get up to Mount Snow. In the parking lot, he says to me, I'll see you at the end of the day. I said, huh? He said, yeah, I'm meeting all of my skiing mates up here, and we're going to go skiing, but you're going to be on your own. I said, but Danny, I've never skied before. He said, well, it's easy. You just got to lean into the mountain. That's what my ski instructor told me a long time ago. It works. Just lean into the mountain. I said, whoa. What do you, and you start walking away. I said, Danny, whoa, can't I come with you? No, you could never keep up with us. I said, well, what are you even talking about? He says, well, default mode is going to be you're going to want to put all of your weight on your back heels. Don't do that. If you really want to ski, if you want it to be fun, you got to lean forward. Just think about putting all of your weight on your toes and leaning, pressing in to the mountain. And with that, he disappeared. Eventually, I got over to the ski lift, got on the chair, started heading up and up and up and up and up. Over on my left, I could see the New England landmark, Old Man on the Mountain. On my right, I could see Mount Kilimanjaro. Because at the top of the world, you see everything. Finally, we got to the top. Unfortunately, an astute ski lift attendant noticed that I had circled around on the ski lift and I was safely heading to the bottom of the mountain. She stopped the ski lift and barked, "Jump!" I can't jump. Give me a bungee cord. We'll talk. Just jump. It's 6 inches. It was more like 8 inches, but I said, I don't want to do this. And so she dragged me out of the chair, and there I sat, right next to this big sign that had a black diamond, which did not intimidate me at all, because I had no clue what it meant. 3 hours later, I was about 20 yards down the mountain only because I was wearing slippery clothes. That's when it occurred to me, if I'm ever going to get off this mountain, I'm going to have to ski down. So I rehearsed in my mind Danny's pep talk. Lean into the mountain. Lean into the mountain. So in a moment of courage, I jumped up on the skis and I started leaning into the mountain. In 5 seconds, I was doing Mach 10. I had to keep a keen eye out for little children so that they could break my fall. I had no other way to stop. And by the time I finally got to the bottom of the mountain, I was convinced my cousin, in his 16 years of life and wisdom, actually had it right. That is the best way to ski. It's scary, but it's the best way to live. Lean into the mountain. Take risks. This is what Paul is telling the young preacher. Lean into the mountain. God did not give you a spirit of timidity, but rather a spirit of courage to take risks. Now I want to tell you about 3 jogs a couple of years ago, all within just a few days of each other. Jog number 1. I was in Seattle, Washington, jogging where I used to pastor. I was there to officiate at a wedding. And so that Sunday morning, I went jogging past Thrasher's Corner. That's where we started a church over 30 years ago. So it's been a long time. And as I jogged past where the church used to meet, I couldn't help but just feel like this hammer in my gut. Back then, it was a growing church. The conference at the time, I think, had about 50 acres. Is that right, Bill? You were in the conference at the time, I think. And the conference president, who insisted that we start this church, told me, look, we're going to allot about 10 acres for the North Creek Church, which is the church that we had started there. And so he said, this is a really prime location, and it was on a 4-lane highway. In fact, we would advertise a stop smoking clinic. We put it on a sign out in front of the conference office there, and within an hour, we would always get the class filled. Over 100 people we could take. And I mean, it was just so much traffic and such a busy intersection there. And so we had this dream And the conference president said to me, look, I think we can give you about 10 acres of the land, and you can build a church. And so we talked to architects, and we wanted to build this gigantic children's church in the shape of a Jonah's whale. And then we wanted to have the classrooms like you're walking through a whale. And so we talked to architects, and then we wanted to add a church meeting space. Beside that, we thought, man, we're on a busy, busy highway, and we're going to have the best children's ministry center in the whole state, and this is going to be so much fun. And we talked to architects. We spent tens of thousands of dollars drawing up plans and so on. Then eventually, there's no other way to say this other than I just got scared. It was so much money. And we were such a small church. And so eventually, the conference relocated, sold the land. I left that church, and they eventually bought a little church out in the country. Now, today, when I was jogging past it a couple of years ago, it is some of the most expensive real estate in the world. They're building $1 million condos on that corner. $1 million condos. As I jogged past, I could not help but wonder, what if we had just taken the risk? I mean, worst case scenario, we would have sold the 10 acres for $1 bajillion. But now, as I was jogging past, it occurred to me there's virtually zero Adventist presence in this community. Oh, it just hurt. And the only reason I can give why we didn't go through with it, I just got scared. I was afraid we might fail. It might be too expensive. I don't know. Jog number 2. A few days later, I was doing a week of prayer at the school where I used to pastor, Walla Walla University. And so I jogged downtown on the main street corner there across from Starbucks and jogged past what is now a clothing store, busiest part of town. And of course, Walla Walla, if you don't know, has just been booming with the wine industry. There are hundreds of wineries around Walla Walla now. So this is really expensive property downtown. And I couldn't help, as I was jogging past it, thinking about an innovative, fun church that we started shortly after I came there to pastor called the Improv Church. We met at 10:30 at night on Friday nights. And the whole idea behind the Improv Church was, look, we know this to be the most ineffective way to communicate and to learn, to put a sage on the stage and disseminate information. And so we thought, let's start a whole new way to do church, to where everybody is involved in a non-threatening way. And together we can create this learning experience. And it was wild. We had 3 colleges in the Walla Walla Valley. Whitman, we had Walla Walla Community College, and then Walla Walla University. And so we advertised on all of the campuses, and it just blew up. I mean, it was so electric. And this venue that we rented, it was called the Center for Sharing. And we rented it. It had a brick backdrop and a balcony, and we could cram 500 people in there. Many nights, we would have kids lining up an hour early to get into the church when we unlocked the doors. And then some nights, we would turn 200 kids away. And we just don't have space, right? It was so fun. And it was just church like I've never experienced church before. But eventually, the owner of that building, who was not an Adventist, but a devoted Christian, she called me into her office and said, look, I need to sell the Center for Sharing. She said, I'm going to put it on the market for $1 million, but I love what I see God doing through the improv church. She says, this is like church that I've never seen before. So I'll tell you what, if you just make me an offer on the building, I'll do everything I can to make it yours because I want to see that ministry continue. Well, we talked about it at staff meeting. I had a couple of people on staff that said, Karl, this is a golden opportunity. We can redefine what collegiate church looks like. We're really onto something. God is at work here. Let's buy the building. Then all week we can use it to reach out and do ministry. Many, many immigrants and farm workers in the Walla Walla Valley, we can serve them and the homeless, and we can do all of these good things. And then, of course, Friday nights, we'll just keep building the improv church. We'll do 2, 3, 5 services. Let's buy the building. And we talked about it for a long time, and eventually I said, I'm scared. I don't want to do it. Think of all the maintenance on a building like that. And so, when I was jogging past what became a clothing store, again, I couldn't help but wonder, what if I just had the courage, the guts to take a risk? Say, what if we had just bought the building? Again, worst case scenario, we would own a piece of property that has multiplied in its value exponentially. It's in a prime spot. We didn't do it. And after we lost that building, we had to close the improv church. We had no place really to meet. So then I thought, third jog. A few days later, I was back home in Dayton. And I was jogging past our campus at the local church where I've pastored now for the past 12 years. And I just thought about jogging past the campus 10 years from now. And I wondered if maybe I would have the same sick feeling. And at the time we were talking about, what if we were to build a children's ministry center? Think about how 10, 20, 50 years from now, how many thousands of young people would meet Jesus in a space like that. And I thought, I do not want to jog past this land 10 years from now and wish that I had had a little bit of courage. And so we, shortly after that, started in on a major building campaign, and right now it's going up 3 stories, and it's going to be amazing. And I can't wait until it's finished. An $8 million building. And I'm so excited about what God's going to do in that space. And we're doing this all the while I still carry these regrets, because I just somehow forget God did not give us a spirit of timidity, friends, but a spirit of courage and of faith. And think about if all of us in the Potomac Conference were to say, we're just going to take risks. Now, it may or may not be to launch into some major building campaign. I'm not suggesting that we all need to do something like that. For you, in your ministry context, it might look like having the courage to confront a bully in the church, or to speak hard truth to people that you know are destroying your church, and the church is never going to really grow until you just have some courage and address the problem head on. Or whatever God's calling you to do, you don't want to get toward the end of your life and reflect back and have that feeling of, what if I had just had a little more courage? Right? I want to look back and say, I took big risks for the kingdom of God, and one thing I learned is God's faithful. When I just followed his leading, he came through. Even though it was a hard conversation to have, even though it was a lot of money to raise, even though there were a lot of obstacles along the way, I feel confident that you will reflect and say, God's faithful. It was worth it. So have courage. Now, a few words about integrity. I think of the passage here in 1 Peter chapter 3, where Peter is describing to wives the best way to influence their husbands. Many of the husbands were not of faith. And so Peter is counseling them, how can you lean them toward God? And he says, wives, in the same way, be submissive to your husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word. So a lot of times we get this passage and we twist it to say things that I don't think Peter is really saying. He's saying, wives, if you want to influence your husbands who don't know God, this is how you do it. So that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by their behavior of their wives. When they see the purity and reverence of your lives, your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as braided hair, the wearing of gold jewelry, and fine clothes. And again, I've heard preachers take this passage to say, see there, women should not be wearing any jewelry, and they should not braid their hair. But if you're true to the text, then you would also have to say, and they should not wear clothes. No. But he's saying your beauty should not come from that. Instead, it should come from your inner self. The unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. He says, if you want to influence people, teachers, if you want to influence your students in your classrooms, I'll tell you how you do it. Pastors, if you want to influence your church members, I'll tell you how you do it. Integrity. The beauty from within. That's what Peter is saying. This is how we influence people. It is through courageous integrity. A couple more stories. When I got out of the seminary, I went to purchase my first new car. So I spent the entire day driving around Seattle talking to every Toyota dealer in the area. I knew that I wanted to purchase a new Corolla, stripped down, none of the extras. I knew what I wanted to pay, and I had an old car that I needed to trade in. So after haggling with dealers all day long, I finally landed at Titus Wills in Tacoma, Washington. I met a salesperson there by the name of Mark. And after all day, I knew exactly the number I wanted to be at. And so I said, let's just skip all the chit-chat. Here's the car. Here's what I want you to pay me for it. This is the cash that I will give you, and I want the cheapest Toyota Corolla that you have. Well, he looked at my numbers and he said, well, it's up to you, but if I was you, I would offer $1,000 less, which was a lot of money because the Toyota Corolla, I think it only cost at that time about $8,000. So he's saying, go $1,000 less. Well, of course, I'd heard the saying, if it sounds too good to be true, what? And I said, well, okay, fine. Put $1,000 less. He said, okay, let me go clear this with my manager. About 30 seconds later, he comes back in and he says, yep, we'll do this deal. Well, I just knew this could not be right. So I said, well, can I sleep on it? He said, sure, I'll be here tomorrow, no worries. Okay. So then I went to the dealer in Auburn where I had started the day. And I said, the guy down the street is willing to do this deal. And he laughed in my face. Said, I can guarantee, I know what he pays for the car. I can guarantee you, he's not going to do this. And he had some derogatory terms of what the guy was trying to do to me. And I said, yeah, I suspect you're right. He said, I can't believe you would be that ignorant to believe he's going to actually do this. When all of the other dealers you talked to, none of them even came close. Yeah, you're right. So the next morning I figured, well, maybe it is true. So I called Mark and I said, listen, Mark, I've already written out the check for what you said I needed to pay. I'm going to drive my car into your lot. I'm going to give you the keys with the check that's already made out for the amount we agreed on, and I'm going to drive away in that new gray FX Corolla that you said I could yesterday. And he said, yeah, come on down. I said, now I know what you're doing to me here. He said, huh? I said, no, I know. He said, no, come on down. No, not a problem. And so I went down there literally in 3 minutes. Deal was done. I was driving away in a brand new Corolla. It was great. Well, a few years later, I wanted to get a Toyota pickup. And so the first person I called was Mark at Titus Wills. Except they told me Mark does not work here any longer. And I had a good sense as to why he was no longer employed there. And so I drove to the closest dealership to my house, which happened to be Rodland Toyota. In this case, I was trading in an old pickup, which unfortunately was such a clunker that it got me to the dealership, but it broke down and it wouldn't start. And I knew it wasn't going to start without a lot of money. And so I was not in a real strong negotiating position, because I knew I needed to make this deal happen. And so I started haggling with a salesperson, ironically, also named Mark. We went back and forth for 2 hours until we were within $100 of a deal. And just then I heard somebody walk behind me who said, yeah, we got something. And I asked Mark, well, what did he just say? Nothing. No, what did he just say? Oh, he said he's got a buyer for the red Toyota pickup that you want to buy if you don't want to buy it, but no problem. And just impulsively, I said, no, fine, $100, who cares? Let's do it. So we had a deal. Well, the paperwork took forever. I was there a couple more hours. Mark, no doubt, figured I had long ago left, but I was still there. When I overheard him in his cubicle laughing with the guy who had walked behind me. And he said, yeah, that trick works every time. People are so stupid, aren't they? Now, if I could have driven my old pickup out of the lot, I probably would have. But here I am, 20 years later, telling you the story. Both Marks influenced me, right? Both of them sold me a vehicle. But which one would I go back to? See, if you want to influence your students and your church members, your colleagues, if you want to influence people, do it with integrity. One more story. I clipped this newspaper article and laminated it and put it in my files. I still have it. I was just really taken by this story. From the Seattle Times, Lisa Thorpe of Linwood passed the Good Samaritan test when she found $50,000 in cash in a roadside ditch and gave it to police. According to Snohomish County Sheriff spokesman Elliot Woodall, A Snohomish man, 65, withdrew the cash Saturday, planning to deposit it in another bank. But first, the man who had recently had a death in his family drove home and became distracted, leaving the money bag on the running board of his pickup truck. Later, he drove the truck on an errand and didn't realize until early Sunday that the money was missing. Thorpe was on a Sunday drive with her family when she noticed a money clip and money in the road in the 200 block of Dubuque Road north of Snohomish. When she stopped to investigate, she found the bag of cash in the ditch. Deputies traced the money through papers in the bag. Now, I'll tell you why I was so intrigued with the story. Because as it happened, I drove the 200 block of Dubuque Road that very Sunday morning. I was house sitting for my cousin who lived on Dubuque Road. So I was determined to have a conversation with Lisa. Now, this was back in the days when you couldn't just do an internet search. So instead, I called information. Is that what it was called? I don't even remember. It was so long ago. And I got like 6 different Lisa Thorpes in Seattle. And so I started calling one by one. Until at last, call number, I think, 4, I asked, hey, would you happen to be the same Lisa Thorpe that they wrote about in the Seattle Times a few days ago? And she said, yeah. And so, well, Lisa, listen, I just want you to know that I'm very moved by the story. And what you did was a very noble and honorable thing. And I just wanted to say thank you. And she seemed a little creeped out by the phone call. And she said, oh, no big deal. She was going to hang up on her and said, oh, hey, whoa. One more question. Didn't you think about keeping the money? She said, no. Well, why not? Well, you probably wouldn't understand. I said, well, just try me. She says, well, have you ever heard of the 10 Commandments? She's asking a Seventh-day Adventist pastor if he's heard of the 10 Commandments. I said, yes, I have. And she said, well, then you know the one about thou shalt not steal, right? And I said, I've heard of it. She says, well, I just choose to live my life by the teachings of the Bible and the 10 Commandments, and so it never really occurred to me to keep the money. And then before she hung up, she said, as far as I'm concerned, my integrity is worth far more than just $10,000. What's your integrity worth? I want to leave us with a little bit of just quiet time for prayer so that you can just personally process some of what we have looked at together here in God's Word. Just let the Spirit of God speak to you for a few moments. We're just going to have quiet in the room. For you to maybe wrestle with God. Where's He calling you to take some risks? Just ask God, give me clarity. Where I'm just afraid. And thank you for reminding me, God, that you did not give me a spirit of fear and timidity, but you're calling me to a life of courage. So where, God, where do you want me to display courage right now in my life, in my ministry? And then talk to God for a few moments about your integrity. Maybe God will reveal to you areas of your life where you're compromising. Just dialogue with God in your own personal space about your courage, about your integrity, about your soul. can we do that? So we're going to give you a few moments, and then whenever you want to go on to the next deal, then just feel free to do that. So just take some time of quiet right now to talk with God.